Nobody saw it coming. Not the reporter, not the crowd, not the millions of people who would later watch the clip on repeat, pause it, rewatch it, and still not fully believe what they'd just seen. One moment, it was a completely ordinary post-match interview. Cameras rolling, lights bright, the kind of scene tennis fans have watched 1,000 times before. And then, in less than 3 seconds, everything changed. Not because of something dramatic, not because of a breakdown or a scandal, but because of 2 words. Just 2. And somehow, those 2 words did something that years of match wins and tournament results hadn't managed to do yet. They made the entire world stop and pay attention to Alex Eala. But here's what almost nobody is talking about. The moment that went viral was only the surface. What was really happening beneath it was something far more complex, far more emotional, and honestly, far more important than most people realized when they first hit the share button. So, let's go back. All the way back. Because to understand why that interview exploded the way it did, you first need to understand what it actually feels like to be Alex Eala. She is not someone who grew up in a country where tennis courts are on every corner. She didn't have the luxury of being surrounded by coaches who immediately recognized her potential. She came from a place where the dream of becoming an international tennis player isn't just difficult, it borders on impossible. And yet there she was, under stadium lights, cameras pointed at her, a crowd that had just watched her perform at a level that made even seasoned observers lean forward in their seats. The atmosphere before the interview was electric in the best possible way. The match had ended. The applause was still echoing. Alex was composed, professional, carrying herself with a quiet confidence that immediately made you wonder, how is someone this young, this calm? She walked toward the interviewer, smiled, ready to answer the usual questions. And for the first few moments, that's exactly what happened. She talked about the match. She thanked the crowd. She spoke with clarity and intelligence. Nothing unusual, nothing tense. Just a young athlete handling the spotlight well. Then something shifted. The interviewer's tone changed. It was subtle at first, the kind of subtle that some people in the crowd might not have caught immediately. But the cameras caught it. And, more importantly, Alex caught it. The reporter began redirecting the conversation, not toward tactics or training or future tournaments. Instead, the focus moved toward the way Alex spoke, the way she pronounced certain words. And here is where the situation becomes complicated, because from the outside, someone might argue it looked harmless, maybe even playful, but there's a feeling that's very difficult to describe unless you've personally experienced it. It's the feeling of being in a room where someone is laughing just slightly too long at the way you said something, where the joke isn't quite a joke, where you can feel the difference between genuine curiosity and something else, something that carries a quiet edge of condescension underneath the smile. Alex felt it, and you could see the exact moment she did. Her posture didn't change dramatically. She didn't look panicked, but her eyes shifted slightly. And in that brief pause, a kind of calculation happened that most people completely missed. Because what came next wasn't a reaction born from anger. It wasn't impulsive. It wasn't even particularly loud. "Shut up, you pee!" That was it. No drama before it, no long speech after it. 2 words dropped into the silence like stones into still water. And the ripples that followed haven't stopped spreading since. The crowd went quiet in a way that's hard to describe. Not the uncomfortable quiet of something going wrong. More like the held breath quiet of something completely unexpected happening in real time. The reporter's expression froze mid-smile. The people standing nearby suddenly became very still. And for about 4 or 5 seconds, the world just paused. Then social media absolutely detonated. Within minutes, the clip was everywhere. TikTok, YouTube, Instagram, X, every platform simultaneously. Sports channels reposted it, reaction creators posted frame-by-frame breakdowns, news pages debated it. But something fascinating happened almost immediately. The conversation didn't stay in the world of sports. It escaped. It traveled into communities that had never watched a single tennis match in their lives. And the reason it traveled so far, so fast, is because it wasn't really about tennis anymore. It was about something that billions of people across the world understand on a personal level. The experience of speaking a language that isn't your first language and being made to feel small because of it. Think about that for a moment. Think about how many people on this planet wake up every single day and navigate their lives in a language they learned, not inherited. Students in classrooms trying to answer questions without mispronouncing words in front of laughing classmates. Adults in professional meetings choosing to stay silent because they're afraid their accent will make people take them less seriously. Immigrants in countries where they've built entire lives, raising families, contributing enormously, and still occasionally feeling the sting of someone mocking the way they say something. Those people watched that clip, and something clicked inside them at a molecular level. Because for most of those people, in most of those situations, they stayed quiet. They forced a smile, they let the moment pass, and carried the discomfort home silently. Alex didn't. And the emotional force of watching someone do what so many people wish they could have done in their own version of that moment is almost impossible to overstate. Comments flooded in from countries that had nothing to do with the sport. Indonesia, India, Nigeria, Brazil, Mexico, Poland. People writing in their own languages about the moment they felt seen by a young tennis player from the Philippines they'd never heard of 48 hours earlier. One comment in particular spread almost as fast as the clip itself. Having an accent means you learned another language. That's not weakness. That's intelligence. That single sentence collected hundreds of thousands of likes within hours. And it pointed towards something that the sports world doesn't always talk about openly, but probably should. There is an unspoken hierarchy in global sports media. And it affects how athletes are treated during interviews depending on where they come from and how they sound when they speak. Athletes from certain countries with certain accents are sometimes held to a different standard. Their English is commented on in ways that native English-speaking athletes never experience. And most of the time, those athletes absorb it quietly because the alternative feels too risky. Speak up and risk being labeled difficult. Stay silent and protect your image. Alex chose a third option that almost nobody expected. She simply refused to pretend the moment wasn't happening. And that refusal, in its raw, unpolished, completely unscripted form, became one of the most widely discussed sports moments of the year. But while the internet was busy arguing about what happened, something else was quietly unfolding. People started doing something interesting. They started looking Alex Eala up. And what they discovered completely reframed the entire story. Because the viral moment suddenly had context. Years of context. Alex's journey to that stadium, to that interview, to that moment under the lights was not a straight line. It was the kind of path that requires a level of determination that most people will never fully understand unless they've lived something similar. She came from a country where tennis, at the international level, is more dream than reality for most kids who pick up a racket. She trained in conditions that were far from ideal. She faced skepticism from people who looked at where she was from and quietly decided she probably wouldn't make it very far. She spent years away from home, in unfamiliar countries, learning to compete against players who had access to resources and infrastructure she could only imagine. And through all of that, she kept going. Not because it was easy, but because she had decided somewhere along the way that she was going to make it impossible for the world to ignore her. When people discovered that backstory, the interview clip hit differently. Because now it wasn't just a young athlete saying two unexpected words on camera, it was the product of years of pressure, sacrifice, and the quiet accumulation of every moment where she had to push through doubt and keep moving forward. And suddenly, millions of people who had never cared about tennis before genuinely wanted to know what happened next for her. The media coverage intensified. Sports analysts began doing something they hadn't done much before. Instead of just discussing her game, they started discussing her mentality, her composure, the psychological profile of a young competitor who, when placed in one of the most uncomfortable situations an athlete can face on live television, didn't flinch. Veteran commentators who had spent decades analyzing elite athletes began using words like extraordinary and rare when describing not her forehand or her footwork, but her mental architecture. And that shift in how she was being perceived created something powerful, a new kind of fan, not the kind who follows because of trophies or rankings, the kind who follows because they genuinely feel connected to someone's story, the kind of fan who shares clips, who defends her in comment sections, who tells their friends, "You have to watch this girl, not because of what she's won, but because of who she is." Meanwhile, the pressure on the reporter grew. Discussions about journalistic professionalism in international sports became louder. People began questioning the standards applied to athletes from non-English speaking countries during media interactions. Were they being treated with the same respect as their counterparts from Western nations? Were subtle forms of condescension being normalized in sports broadcasting without anyone openly addressing it? These were uncomfortable questions. The most kind of questions that don't have clean, easy answers. But they were being asked at scale, in public, by millions of people simultaneously. And that collective questioning had value, not just for Alex, but for every international athlete who had ever sat in front of a camera and felt that particular discomfort without the platform or the courage to say something about it. What made Alex's moment even more striking in hindsight was the calmness. People keep coming back to that. There was no trembling voice, no visible overwhelm, no moment where she seemed unsure whether to speak. Just a clear-eyed, ice-cold delivery of exactly what she felt in exactly that moment. Athletes at the very top of their sport talk constantly about the ability to slow time during high-pressure situations, to see clearly when everyone around them is reacting emotionally, to respond rather than just react. What Alex demonstrated in that moment wasn't the kind of composure you develop overnight. It's built through thousands of hours of training under pressure, through competing in environments where nerves are normal and managing them is essential, through learning, match after match, that falling apart in difficult moments costs you everything, and staying calm costs you nothing. She had built that internal architecture over years of competition, and when the pressure appeared off the court, in the most unexpected setting, it held. And people saw it. Not just sports fans, everyone. Because that kind of visible mental strength is magnetic regardless of your interest in any particular sport. The story continued evolving in the days that followed. What started as a controversy transformed into something almost celebratory. People began reclaiming the narrative entirely. Instead of focusing on the discomfort of the original moment, fans started flooding social media with messages about identity, about pride, about the courage it takes to refuse to shrink yourself for someone else's comfort. Young athletes from countries similar to the Philippines started posting about their own experiences, about the moments they had stayed quiet when they shouldn't have, about the times they'd let subtle disrespect slide because the alternative felt too scary. And for many of them, watching Alex changed something, not dramatically, not overnight, but in the quiet, lasting way that a genuinely powerful moment can shift how a person thinks about themselves. That is the legacy of a viral moment done right. Not noise, not chaos, but a genuine shift in how people see themselves in relation to something they watched on a screen. And that's rare, genuinely rare. Most viral moments burn bright and disappear within a week, replaced by the next trending thing. What happened here embedded itself differently. It became part of a larger conversation that didn't fade, that kept getting referenced, kept getting shared in new contexts, kept being used as an example of something real and important and worth discussing. Weeks later, Alex Eala's name was being mentioned in conversations that had nothing to do with match results. Her story was being used in discussions about media representation, about the treatment of international athletes, about confidence and self-worth. She had, without intending to, become a reference point for something bigger than sport. And that changes a career in ways that wins alone never quite can. Because fans who connect emotionally to who an athlete is, not just what they achieve, follow that athlete through everything. Through the losses, through the difficult seasons, through the moments of doubt that every competitor eventually faces. Those fans stay, and Alex had just gained millions of them. Now the spotlight is bigger than it has ever been before. The expectations have shifted. The pressure is different. Every match she plays from this point forward will carry the weight of a much larger audience watching with much higher anticipation. And that's both a gift and a challenge. A gift because opportunity follows attention, and she now has more of it than ever. A challenge because maintaining that mental composure, that quiet confidence, That refusal to be rattled, not just in interviews but across an entire career, requires a level of consistency that only the truly elite ever achieve. But here's the thing. Everyone who has watched her closely, every analyst, every coach, every fan who has paid attention not just to what she does, but how she carries herself under pressure, most of them believe she has something that cannot be taught: a groundedness. A knowledge of who she is that doesn't waver even when the environment around her becomes unpredictable. That quality, more than any specific skill or physical attribute, is what separates athletes who have a good career from athletes who become something people talk about long after they've retired. And now, because of one unexpected moment in a post-match interview, the entire world has had a front-row seat to that quality. They saw it clearly. Many of them immediately recognized what it meant, and millions of them are now waiting to watch the next chapter. Because here's the truth that ties everything together. Sometimes the moment that defines someone's legacy has nothing to do with their greatest win. Sometimes it's the moment they refuse to lose in a different kind of fight. The kind where the cameras were rolling, the crowd was watching, and every instinct said, let it go. But everything they were made of said, no, not this time. And in that split second, they became something more than what they were before. Alex Eala became more in that interview than she'd been walking into it. Not more famous, although that too, but more fully herself in public, more completely known, more genuinely seen. And for a generation of young people watching from every corner of the world, that visibility became a kind of permission. Permission to speak, permission to take up space, permission to never apologize for who you are or where you come from. 2 words. That's all it took. But behind those 2 words was an entire life. And that's the story the world is still telling.